What's up everybody? Welcome back to Unparalleled Universe for another action figure comparison video, and today we're taking a look at the Mezco 112 Collective Homecoming Homemade Suit Spider-Man, and we're going to see how he compares to the S.H Figuarts version. And as a special guest appearance, I do have the Marvel Legends one here because even though I really don't think that he's in the same league as these other two figures, I do think that he's nice and he does deserve to be mentioned, so we'll talk about him a little bit too. So starting off with the overall look and the execution of the design, I think that Mezco really has an unfair advantage because the look of Homemade Suit Spider-Man just suits Mezco's style really well, and I mentioned that a lot in my review, and I think that is a huge factor when trying to decide which one of these two figures look better, because this guy looks like he jumped right out of the movie. There are some details missing. Like I said, it doesn't have the zipper, he's missing actual pockets, and he doesn't have a string hanging from his waist, so it really doesn't look like he's wearing sweats. It looks like he's wearing some kind of weird bodysuit, and I think the Figuarts version does have the string there for the sweats, so that's one thing that the Figuarts one has that the Mezco one does not. But in terms of just in general, like the overall look, I think obviously the Mezco one is a lot better. But if you just prefer sculpted figures, this one does do a really good job of capturing the look, but there are some things about the sculpt I don't like. They did a lot of weird floating pieces to kind of make it so that the articulation works and it doesn't get hindered too much, but I think that it kind of hurt the sculpt, especially here. Like, I really don't like the way this thing looks really goofy to me. It does help him out in the articulation department, but not so much in the sculpt. And same thing with the hood. The hood is just kind of floating around. It looks really funny. And as far as the head sculpts go, I think the head sculpt is a lot better on the Mezco one. I just like the shape. I've never been a fan of the shape of the Figuarts one. It just looks too round or something, but I do like the Mezco one a lot. And just the colors and everything, they both do a good job there. But I will say that the web blasters on the Figuarts one do look a little bit better than they do on the Mezco one. Like I said on my review, the Mezco one is a little sloppy. The Figuarts one does look really nice, so check it out. Yeah, the sculpting work is really good there. But overall, the general look and execution of the character is a lot better on the Mezco one. But that was bound to be the case. And I'm not saying that the Figuarts one looks bad, but there are a few things on there that I don't like. And as for the Marvel Legends one, I think the sculpt is really nice on this guy, but I do think the colors are off. I feel like the red is a little too dark, like more maroon than red. I feel like it should be bright red, kind of like the other two figures there. But the sculpting work is really nice on him, and it has a lot of details. It doesn't have like any reused parts or anything. It does look like he's wearing sweatpants, which is good. But yeah, overall, this figure does look really cool. For the articulation, it's not even a comparison, really. The Figuarts one is far superior in the articulation department to both the Mezco one and the Marvel Legends one. I'd say the Mezco and Marvel Legends version have pretty similar articulation. They both have double jointed elbows, double jointed knees, ball jointed shoulders. They have some torso articulation, all that good stuff. I'd probably say that the Marvel Legends one probably gets a little bit better movement on the legs than the Mezco one does. But for the most part, their articulation is very, very similar. And I mean, they're both good. Neither one of them are bad, but they do not compare to the Figuarts version. The Figuarts version, it seems like their main focus was articulation with this guy, and they even made some sacrifices when it comes to the sculpt. But for the most part, the articulation is very nice on the Figuarts one, and that's where it's kind of a benefit to have those weird floating pieces, because you could get them to crunch without having a huge gap in the back, which if that wasn't there, then you'd have a big ugly gap, as you could see there. That's horrible. But with that floating piece, that's not a problem. And yeah, aside from that, the articulation on this guy is very, very nice. He's a lot of fun to pose and play with, except for those floating pieces. Those floating pieces are really ruining this figure for me, if I'm being honest. But anyways, the articulation is very nice. He's only missing a few things. I'd say the only thing he doesn't have is an upper bicep swivel, and a lot of Figuarts figures don't have that. I'd say probably most of them don't. And you could still kind of get a swivel out of the shoulder, but it's a little tough with Spider-Man because his shoulders are very small and it's hard to get any good movement out of there. But you do have like a butterfly type of thing going on, so you get some movement there. So for the most part, I think that you could get any poses that you want. And as for the Mezco one, you could get some really nice poses out of him too. It'll probably take a little more work, and you also have to be a little careful with it because you don't want to like ruin the material or anything like that. But for the most part, all the figures that you'd want Spider-Man to get into are pretty much possible with the Mezco one. But like I said, it just doesn't compare to the articulation on the Figuarts one. So for accessories, both the Figure Arts version and the Mezco version come with a bunch of cool things, including several sets of hands. Both of them have the essential Spider-Man hands, which would be fist, whip hands, and wall crawling hands. In addition to those, the Figure Arts version has 2 web line holding hands. The Mezco one only has 1, and then the Figure Arts one also has loose open hands, and then it also has a set of hang loose hands. So those are really nice. I do wish that the Mezco one had some hang loose hands. You could add some personality to the figure. That would have been cool. But yeah, the Figure Arts one does include those. And on top of that, the Figure Arts one does include an interchangeable hood accessory where you could have it so the hood is laying down on him on his back, or you could have it over his head. And obviously the Mezco one doesn't really need that because it has a cloth hood and you could put it over his head very easily. And they both come with a bunch of different web accessories. I'd say that the web accessories for the Mezco one are far superior to the ones on the Figure Arts one, because I never liked the way that the Figure Arts webs look. They kind of look cloudy and weird. They don't look like Spider-Man webs, but the ones that come with the Mezco version do look really nice, and there's really nice sculpt work on them. And I don't have it here, but there is a version of the homemade suit Spider-Man from Figure Arts that you could buy that comes with a brick wall, and I think that's actually the most common over here in the US anyways, and that's really cool because that's still less expensive than the Mezco one, so I do want to talk about that here and make sure that it gets its credit. But the one thing that the Figure Arts one does not have is an unmasked head sculpt, and the Mezco one has a really nice looking one. So, you know, when it comes to accessories, it's really, which one do you prefer? Do you want like a brick wall, or do you want an unmasked Tom Holland head? For me, I prefer the unmasked head. The brick wall is cool and everything, but there's other ways to get brick walls, you know, but there's not many options when it comes to unmasked Tom Holland heads. So, you know, it's really a matter of preference right there. And the Legends one doesn't really come with too many accessories. He comes with a pair of fists and a pair of whip hands, and then he also has an interchangeable hood piece, very similar to the Figure Arts one. And for scale, as you can see, all 3 of these figures look pretty good within their own lines. The Figure Arts one looks really nice next to Iron Man. The Marvel Legends one looks pretty good next to Cap, and then the Mezco one looks good next to Thor. If anything, I think the Mezco one would have benefited from being a little bit smaller, but I think as is, it works fine. And he is too big to interchange with other lines. You might be able to squeeze him into Marvel Legends, but he's definitely not going to work with Figure Arts. But the Figure Arts one, I think he could work fine with Marvel Legends or Mezco if you want your Peter Parker to be a little bit smaller. That works pretty good because Figure Arts figures just tend to run smaller than other lines. So if you're happy with him being a little guy, then he's gonna look good next to Marvel Legends and Mezco. If you want to mix them up stylistically, all these things kind of clash with each other, and for me, I really don't mind mixing up lines. It all depends on what I'm doing. For my display, I keep things separate, but when it comes to taking pictures, I like to mix things up. So you know, with that in mind, some kind of things might work here, but you're gonna have to use your own judgment there. Okay guys, now let's do a quick recap. When it comes to scale and accessories, I think both of these figures are pretty much even. When it comes to articulation, I think the Figure Arts one is far superior to the Mezco one. And when it comes to capturing the look and the feel and the overall design of the character from the movie, then I'm going to say that the Mezco one demolishes the Figure Arts one. And in my opinion, I like the Mezco figure a lot more than I like the Figure Arts one. The Figure Arts one is cool to mess around and pose and play with, but I think the sacrifices they made on the sculpt aren't really worth the articulation that it gained. You could get him into all the poses that you want and all that cool stuff, but I just think that it doesn't look very good. It just looks kind of ugly to me. That's just my opinion. I'm not going to argue with anyone that says that they like that figure more. You're entitled to that opinion, and that's cool, but for me, I just don't like the way it looks. And with the Mezco one, I love the way it looks, and you could pretty much get him into most poses that you'd want to get Spider-Man into. So even though the articulation isn't as good on the Mezco one, it still has everything it needs pretty much. And as far as I'm concerned, there are a few things they could have thrown in there to make the articulation a little bit better, but for the most part, he has everything he needs, and you could get him into some pretty cool poses. One thing that kind of sucks about the Mezco one, as I mentioned in my review, is they made it an exclusive, which I think was really foolish of Mezco, because this figure really highlights Mezco's strengths, and they should have made it available to everybody. So that's one thing that the Figure Arts one has over the Mezco one. Of course, if you like that Figure Arts one, you could just go buy it. There's no hassle, and it does come with that really cool diorama wall, so that's awesome. And it's not a bad figure. Just for me, I just wasn't crazy about it, but if someone likes it, I could definitely see why. It does capture the look from the movie perfectly fine. It just doesn't do it as well as the Mezco one. And honestly, if you don't want to pay for either one of these expensive expensive figures, then I think the Marvel Legends one is a pretty good option, because even though he doesn't have the articulation of the Figure Arts one and he doesn't have the look of the Mezco one, he's still a really good representation of the character, and he does have good articulation. So, and he's way cheaper than both of these guys, and you could just go out and buy him, and he's a really cool figure. I just think the colors are a little bit off, but other than that, I really don't have any big gripes with this guy. Of course, he could have came with more accessories, but you know, it is what it is. For like a, you know, $25 Marvel Legends or $20 Marvel Legend figure, then I think that he's worth it, and he's a good figure. So he's definitely an option if you don't want to buy one of these expensive figures. But yeah, anyways, I think that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to let me know which figure you like the most out of these three. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And thank you very much. Peace.
That's crispy.